Hey everyone, welcome to week 6 of our European Super League. For anyone that's just starting now to watch this series, basically what we're doing is an experiment of, what if there was a European Super League going on right now with all the best teams in Europe, where they were to play each other week in and week out in a true double round robin league format with promotion and relegation. I'll go over real quick how the rules work for anyone jumping in now. If you want to see a little more in depth of how I've done my calculations, I'll put a link to the first video in this series that explains that a little bit more. Let's go through it real quick and then we'll look at the results from this week. So the top 20 teams based on UEFA coefficients from last season were the teams that I included in this Super League. The top 5 at the end of the season would get some sort of bonus prize money to create this incentive that to come in the top of the table. In a lot of the leagues, the domestic leagues today, it's top 4, and the incentive is qualifying for the Champions League. And I wanted to preserve that excitement around coming in the top 4 or 5, the top teams in the league, as something to root for, even if you're not going to be the champion of the league, but to reach that threshold where there's a bigger incentive. Bottom 5 are relegated to Super League B, so there is a system of promotion relegation in this Super League, and I'll show the results from the Super League B this week as well. The tougher the opponent, the more points a win is worth. So this is how we compare teams from different leagues, apples to apples. How we determine how difficult an opponent is using the 538.com SPI rating. So let me take you over to 538.com real quick. So this is 538.com. What they do is they compile a lot of data on soccer matches and they come up with a score that ranks every team basically in the world. So you can see right now Bayern Munich is the top team with an SPI of 94. Keep going down the list. You see all the familiar names from Europe. Liverpool 87.9, Chelsea 83, Tottenham 81, Ajax 79, and so on. And it goes much farther down than that. You can get down to teams like West Brom, 58.6. And you start getting pretty low, and eventually you get to teams outside of Europe like Columbus and Major League Soccer has an SPI of 41. So this is just the way I've decided to sort of rank how difficult an opponent is. And so the way the Super League works is when you get a win, which would normally be 3 points in a domestic league, we're going to factor in how difficult that opponent is. So if you're playing a team like Guadalajara right here is 44.9, you'll multiply that 3 points by 0.449. So you'll end up only getting, in this case, less than half of that 3 points, somewhere closer to 1 point. But if you beat a team like Bayern Munich, who's almost 100 SPI, 94 SPI, you'll multiply that 3 points by 0.947, and you're going to get a score that's pretty close to 3 points, 2.8 or 2.9. So let's go through the table. Now that I've kind of recapped some of the rules of this simulated Super League, let's look at how Week 6 played out. So I'll just go down the list. PSG, once again, is at the top of the table. I'll probably say this every video till the end of the season, but always pay attention to number of games played. PSG has played 8 games. Most of the rest of the table has played 5 or 6 or 4. So even though they're in the lead, that may not last through the rest of the season. And you can see they've got 9.87 Super League points. Real Madrid in second place has only played 6 games and is at 9.62. So with 2 games in hand, Real Madrid's looking a little bit better than PSG at the moment. But PSG did get a win this week. They played Dijon FCO. Again, I'll say this every time, PSG, a lot of the teams they play are lower SPIs. This is less than 50 SPI, 47. So their win was only worth 1.44, less than half of the normal 3 points. And eventually that's going to catch up with PSG if they can keep winning, but if the opponents have low SPIs, they're going to eventually lose out to teams like Real Madrid and Liverpool, that are playing teams with higher SPIs. For example, Real Madrid, they played Barcelona last week. Barcelona is definitely off the charts good in terms of SPI. They're almost at 90. But even Liverpool played Sheffield United, which I think Sheffield is in the relegation zone right now for the Premier League, but they've got an SPI of 66. So even one of the weaker teams in the Premier League has a higher SPI than this team in the French league. So going down the list, we mentioned Real Madrid. El Clasico was a great El Clasico. They beat out Barcelona 3-1. And of course, that's going to be great for Real Madrid standing in the Super League. Because like I just pointed out, that's almost the full 3 points. For beating a team that's got such a high SPI, they're going to get most of those points from that win. And that's definitely going to bump their standing. They're up 1 place from last week. They swapped places in the table with Liverpool. And speaking of Liverpool, they won against Sheffield United, 66 SPI, 2 points, keeps Liverpool in the top 5 zone. Still in number 4 is Borussia Dortmund, same as last week. They had their derby against Schalke 4. Schalke has a 56 SPI, a 3-0 win will give them 1.7 points. So not too high of an SPI, but enough to keep them in the bonus prize money zone. And coming into the top 5 is Bayern Munich, who moved up 3 places with the win against Eintracht Frankfurt. Who has an SPI of 73. And that score line kind of says it all. I think it was a hat trick by Robert Lewandowski. Got them 2.2 points. So a great win for Bayern Munich, who of course, was always going to be a contender for the European Super League. They won the Champions League last year. And so it'll be fun to keep watching them week in and week out. Okay, now we get into the middle of the table. Atletico Madrid is moving up right to the threshold of the top 5 with a win against Real Betis. A 2-0 win with Luis Suarez scoring a goal. Leon moved up 3 spots with a 4-1 win against Monaco, giving them, Monaco has a pretty decent SPI of 68, giving them 2.05 Super League points. Napoli moved down 1 place with a win against Benevento. Some teams still overtook Benevento with pretty low, some teams overtook Napoli this week. Their win was worth a little bit less, only a 54 SPI from Benevento. So that's only going to get them 1.62 Super League points. Keep leaving them in 8th place for now. Chelsea had a pretty interesting match this week against Manchester United. A 0-0 draw. I still thought it was a pretty exciting match. I watched some of it, and definitely great defense on both sides. And kind of exciting to see the two typical powerhouses. Maybe not as much of powerhouses in recent seasons, but some great players really going head to head there. And I think it was an entertaining 0-0 draw. But Manchester United, they have an SPI of 82. They're not, as much as they might be struggling in the Super League and domestically, they're still not a team to take lightly. And that 82 is deserved, and so is the 0.83 points for the draw for Chelsea. Okay, Juventus. Juventus also drew 1-1 against Verona. That'll give them 0.59 points. Pretty low SPI, so that's not going to do them too many favors throughout the season. But it was enough to move them up from 11th to 10th place this week in the Super League. Manchester City, also a draw against West Ham United. West Ham have been, they've been doing pretty well to pull out at least a couple of draws, and I'd say at least they're getting points where they're not necessarily expected to. A draw against Manchester City, a draw against Tottenham. So West Ham has really they're also a team to watch out for and for the teams in England. But that'll give 0.74 points to Manchester City, which was enough to bump them up 3 places and keep them a little bit farther away from the relegation zone. Tottenham actually hasn't played yet as of this video. They'll play, it's Sunday right now, they'll play tomorrow. So they'll have a game in hand, and their standing will get updated in next week's video. Arsenal played Leicester City and lost by 1 goal. So that dropped them down 7 places as the rest of the teams advance with wins and draws. That leaves Arsenal closer to the relegation zone. Ajax moved up 4 places, getting out of the relegation zone with a win against VVV Venlo. Now this was a pretty crazy game, a 13-0 win, which if I remember right is a record in their league for most goals scored in a game or highest win. And of course, if you look at the SPI for the team that this was against, a 33, I think of all the tracking I've done so far for these videos, that's the lowest SPI I've seen anyone play of any opponent in the Super League. So even though they won and they won by 13 points, that 3 points gets turned into 1 point because of such a low SPI. So you can kind of see how this starts to even out where, Chelsea, who drew against Manchester United, 0.83 is almost 1, and it's about the same as a win that Ajax got against Venlo. Okay, last before we get to the relegation, so Benfica. Okay, so Benfica actually also did not play this week. They'll have a game in hand, and we will see. We'll update their standing next week. Okay, let's get to the relegation zone. So most surprising is Barcelona in 16th place, putting them the first team in the relegation zone. Of course, they lost to Real Madrid, and it's surprising. Barcelona is probably the biggest name, maybe with Manchester United, but Barcelona has struggled. There's been all the issues with Messi maybe leaving the club. Luis Suarez left the club, or I should say they forced Luis Suarez to leave the club. Still a lot of questions for Barcelona. New coach this season. It would be really interesting if Barcelona couldn't pull themselves out of the relegation zone. I don't think that'll happen, but it'll be interesting to watch. Next, we've got FC Porto with a 1-0 win against Gil Vicente. Gave them 1.34 points. Not enough to make it out of the relegation zone, but it moved them up 3 places. They were in last week. Manchester United moved up 1 place with their draw against Chelsea, but still well in the relegation zone. Another team that's struggling domestically, and it'll be interesting to see if they can pull themselves out of the relegation zone. And one of the things we all love about the relegation promotion style is that teams like Benfica, Ajax, Napoli, Lyon, some of these teams that normally you don't put them together with teams like Barcelona, maybe Manchester United, at least the Manchester United of maybe a few years ago. But because anything can happen in these round robin leagues, if they can avoid the relegation zone, they can send a stronger team like Barcelona or Manchester United down to Super League B, and they get to enjoy the extra revenue, the publicity of one more season in Super League A, whereas Barcelona or Manchester United, they now get the diminished publicity and revenue and acclaim that comes of being in the Super League B. So completely based on merit, and it's interesting to see how it plays out. So the last two, we've got Roma with a 5-2 win from Benevento. Actually, that was also from last week. They haven't played their game yet. But Sevilla, they had a loss to Eibar, and we'll move them down into last place in the table. Okay, so that is Super League A. Now let's go down to Super League B and see how that week went. Okay, so we've also got, for anyone just jumping into the series now, we've got 20 teams as well in Super League B. Also picked in a similar way, a little bit differently for reasons I explain in the previous video, but also looking at their SPI against other teams in Europe. But these are the 20 teams that I picked to be in Super League B. And we've got Zenit St. Petersburg in first place. Of course, they've played 12 games in the Russian league, so it's hard to compare. But they've got 11.81 points. Real Sociedad has 9.85 points, so just 2 points behind, with having played 5 less games. So once everything evens out, I think a lot of these teams will overtake Zenit St. Petersburg. But for now, they are in the promotion zone. Even though they did lose to Rubin Kazan with a SPI of 49. Real Sociedad won their game 4-1 against SD Huesca, and that brought them up 2 points, or 2 places, into second place. Everton had their first loss of the Premier League this week to Southampton. Moved them down 1 place, but still in the promotion zone. Leicester City won against Arsenal, which of course is going to be a great win. They've got 78 SPI, so that's going to be a solid 2.36 points, which took them up 4 places and well into the promotion zone. And last in the promotion zone is Aston Villa, who also had their first loss of the Premier League. They were perfect. They had only won all their games. They'd won all their games so far domestically, and then a loss to Leeds United moves them down 2 places, but still in the promotion zone. Middle of the table, we have RB Leipzig with a win against Hertha Berlin, Villarreal with a draw against Cadiz, Getafe with a loss against Granada, AC Milan hasn't played yet this week. We'll update their score next week. Southampton had their win against Everton. Everton has a pretty good SPI right now. So that's going to be a solid 2.3 points. That was enough to take Southampton up 6 places out of the promotion zone and well into the middle of the table. West Ham had their draw against Manchester City, which again is going to be pretty good points for a draw, 0.92. Now, Manchester City has one of the highest SPIs of any opponent you can play against, so a draw against them really is as valuable, as some wins you could have against other teams with lower SPIs. Wolves played Newcastle and got a draw. Inter played Genoa with a win, giving them 1.64. FC Salzburg with a win against Austria Vienna. Real Betis lost against Atletico Madrid. And finally, we get to the relegation zone. So just starting to come out of the relegation zone, or trying to make their way out of the relegation zone, is Atalanta. A loss against Sampdoria is going to move them down 4 places. Eintracht Frankfurt also moved down to the relegation zone 4 places with their loss to Bayern Munich. Hoffenheim moved down 3 places. They were in 15th. They are now in the relegation zone. So we're seeing a lot of churn in the relegation zone. Some of these teams, Inter, Wolves, Southampton, they were all in the relegation zone last week. And now you're seeing Atalanta, Frankfurt, Hoffenheim. Of course, it's early in the season. You're going to see this kind of churn just because there's so few games played still that it can, one team wins one team loses one, and it completely changes the promotion or relegation zone. But Borussia Mönchengladbach had a win against Mainz, and that moved them out of last place, which was taken by Bayer Leverkusen, who also hasn't played this week yet, and we'll update their score next week. So that is Super League B with your promotion and relegation zones. Again, these teams would get relegated to Super League C. I haven't been tracking a Super League C, or I haven't picked any teams that would play in a Super League C. I think I probably will before the end of the series, and just go through, show that quickly at the end of every video is how a Super League C would play out. I just think it's fun to see the relegation and promotion, all the way down the European tower of different teams, Super League C, Super League D. And kind of the way I envision it is, we'd have these leagues, this tier of leagues that would go down as far as it makes sense. You could have a Super League E, F, G, H. And basically, I'd go down to the point where once it kind of isn't feasible anymore for these teams to travel, once their budgets aren't that big, maybe you get to the point where they're not full-time professionals that are paid and they can't travel or have an intensive schedule. At that point, I would probably end the layers of super leagues and resume with domestic leagues. So there'd be a league in England or Italy of these kind of semi-professional teams, or that they don't have the kind of budget to be playing all over Europe. But the winners of those domestic leagues could make their way into the bottom tier of European Super Leagues. And that's kind of how I envisioned that it could play out, is there be this system of relegation, promotion all the way down of Europe, finally scattering into domestic leagues as teams work their way up and down the ladder. So that's it for this week. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions about my calculations or things I didn't go over, feel free to put comments below, and I'll definitely answer any questions you have. Thanks for watching.